If you've considered circle prospecting to fill your pipeline and make it a great year, but aren't quite sure what to expect or how it's going to look, stay tuned. We've got tips and tricks surrounding circle prospecting on tap. What's happening? J.C Agajanian here, broker associate with the Whissel Realty Group, and today we are talking circle prospecting. There's a lot involved, but at its core, you're basically putting a pin on the map around your listing, your broker's listing, your coworker's listing, or really any listing in the area you plan to target, and you're dialing the phone to talk to people and figure out who might have a buyer for that property, or more importantly, be on the maybe we'll sell soon list for you, because that's how we're going to build our own off-market database, one property at a time. So first things first, don't get too busy on the phone with these people. You're interrupting their day. You've called them cold. So just stick to the script. I'm assuming you've got a great and simple script that you can stick to. Build rapport and add them to your database. Set the appropriate follow-up in the future, measure the expectations with these types of calls, right? The timing likely will be open-ended for a lot of these people, and we cannot or should not ever try and force our timing on people. It's our job to identify them and stay in front of them, but ultimately, people are living their own lives, and there's nothing we can really do or say to change that. Talking about expectations, it's not necessarily to get now business when we're doing this type of prospecting. Now, it can happen, and that would be amazing, but if we were expecting that, we would be let down right away and probably not do it anymore at all. The idea is to get hand raisers, like I just said, people who indicate maybe they're not ready to sell right now, but they are thinking about it in the next 6 months, the next year, even the next couple of years. If you're really focusing in on farming an area that you want to sell in, that is a great way to identify potential sellers long before they're actually on Zillow, checking their home's value, or reaching out to any of the other lead generation platforms out there. And as I just mentioned, it doesn't have to be your listing. Let's not let that be an excuse or a roadblock in this effort. If you are really trying to dig in and make contact with people, it doesn't have to be your listing. You can call on a just sold, just listed, a coming soon, an open house inventory. There's various reasons for the call, but once you get into the call, the idea is to stick to that same script. So the initial intro may be a little bit different depending on if it's your listing that you are trying to hype up, or if it's informative and you're telling somebody what something just sold for. But in the end, we're trying to find out if there's any motivation to sell anytime soon, what their likelihood of doing so is, where they might go if and when they do sell, so that we have a decent understanding of their specific timing and motivation, so that we can come around that and help them move through that process potentially quicker, but in general, we want to go in their timing with them and help them through it. So this brings us to long-term nurture, long-term follow-up. What does that look like? A lot of these people are going to be a year, 2 years out, and we've now identified them. Hopefully we've gotten an email address from them so that we can stay in touch with them electronically. But what are you really going to do if someone says, I'm not moving for 2 years? Obviously, it's not really going to be appropriate to be calling them every few weeks, because they're going to say, what the heck are you doing? I just told you it's going to be a couple years before I do anything. So right away, we want to offer something of value when we make contact. So if you have a system like HomeBot or some other home valuation system that updates them on a monthly basis, plug them into it right away. When you do so, it's a little bit appropriate, even though their timing is long-term out, to give a follow-up call and make sure that they received that item of value or whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a HomeBot valuation, but something you're doing to help them out. And when you do that, you should address the elephant in the room right away. Say something to the effect of, I remember you saying it's going to be a year or two before you really do anything. I'm just calling to make sure you receive my email and see if you had any questions surrounding it. I want to be here as a resource for you. And at that point, then you might taper down the follow-up to what you deem appropriate. Regardless of how far out they are, I don't think it's a great idea to just not call them for a super extended period of time. At least a couple times a year would make sense to check in. Again, address the known, make sure you pick up where you left off, keep good notes, and maybe mention something from the last conversation, and then move forward with it. The other thing you can do, especially if these people are in a farm that you would like to work, another thing you could say when you're making these calls that may be a little premature is just say the obvious. Hey, listen, things change for people all the time. We know that can affect their timeline. So I want to just make sure that you're still planning on doing this a year and a half from now, 6 months from now, 2 years from now, whatever the case may be. Because it's true. People have life events that change their timelines on a regular basis, and then we get all upset when they do something that didn't fall in line with one conversation we had 6 months ago. Well, shoot, that's a long period of time. They may or may not even remember you, and none of it has to do with maybe a death in the family or a kid getting into a college across the country or whatever other myriad of reasons somebody may have to speed up or postpone their timeline for a big move like selling their home and relocating. In addition to calling from time to time with appropriate messaging, making sure that you maintain rapport with this person that you've had a decent conversation with last time, is to offer them things that may be valuable to them, especially if they are inside a farm that you're trying to work. If you do any sort of company events, make sure that they get the invitations. If there's an update on a specific zip code, and not only is this farm inside that zip code, but it doesn't even cover the entire zip code, well, maybe that's something that they would find helpful. Maybe it's a community event or something cool happening in the area that they might not already know about. That could be another reason to stay in touch, offer something of value without being pushy or needy as a salesperson. A final tip on the circle dialing is that you don't always have to be dialing. It sounds kind of counterintuitive, but there are great tools that enable you to drop voicemails without the phone actually ringing to large swaths of people all at once. Of course, it's a paid service. It's not free, but it's not that expensive, especially when compared to snail mail or other means of seller follow-up on a long-term nurture. The cool thing about Slide Broadcast is that you can customize it. For example, maybe you've got a buyer looking in this same farm that we're talking about and they're not quite finding what they want. Well, you could send a letter in the mail, but we've heard and we all know that a lot of sellers and just homeowners in general are probably a little jaded to the old yikes campaign, and they may see through it and think that you don't actually have a buyer. They may just think you're one of all the other realtors soliciting a listing. But if you use a voicemail drop and actually let the person hear your voice, mention the name of the buyers that are looking for a property and what type of property in said name part of town, so you're making it very unique to this part of town, unique to your client, it's going to be so much more genuine, and you're going to actually receive some phone calls back. Now, are you going to get calls back on every Slide Broadcast or group voicemail drop that you send out? Probably not. Besides Slide Broadcast, by the way, Call Action is another great tool. Varying prices for sure, so check them both out. The integrity and authenticity is there. They can hear it in your voice, and there's a much higher likelihood of getting a call back on a call like that, as opposed to something general or clearly intended for the masses. In the end, this circle dialing is a great way to fill your pipeline, to build your database, and probably even dig up pocket listings that you can catch people very early with, hold them back because they don't want to be marketed just yet. But as time goes by, you might be able to match up a buyer with that seller. And if you can set the timing right, an off-market sale with two sides is a fantastic result from the hard effort and time you're putting into calling all these sellers. That's going to wrap it for today, but feel free to comment or DM right here, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take this discussion a little further. Talk to you soon.